Welcome everyone to our second webinar for Farming of the Farms of the Future program with the DPI. If I could just ask if, you're not presenting, if you want to just turn your video off, just to save a bit of bandwidth. We've got a fair few people coming in. Thanks to those who were at our event last week. Our recording of last week's event, for those who missed it, should be ready hopefully in a couple of days. It's just gone through editing and will be in approval soon. I'd like to first welcome and thank our three pilot growers who will be on the event today. Brian Ditchfield, Rob Tuck and James Crossing. We've got a series of videos which we've produced, seeing that we can't actually get on farm for this event. So we've been out and produced a couple of videos to give you an overview of some of the things that they've been involved in and some of the sensors and getting their input, but we'll also have a chance for a Q&A. So Joe, can you just pull up the agenda, please? Great, thanks. So the first thing after Joe gives a bit of a Zoom intro, I'll just give an overview of how we went through the selection process and what we were looking for as part of our pilot locations. This was a relatively short pilot project, so we had some specific criteria there. Then we'll jump into the Canamble overview with Brian's video, and then a Q&A with Brian, followed by James Crossing at Angelong near Blaney and Rob Tuck out at Narromine. Joe, if you just want to jump over to your intro and...
Yeah, we'll do. So
our new Zoom participants.
Yes, sorry, this seems a bit slow to move this slide today. So yes, welcome everyone, and we've just got a couple of sort of, I guess, housekeeping things for the session. So as Scott mentioned, there is quite a bit of video content. So if we can keep cameras off while that video is running, that would be great. Obviously keep muted unless you're talking or presenting. And but we do encourage questions. So we're going to use predominantly the chat function for questions today. So if you can see the chat function there, if you just type your questions in there, then we've got Scott and Ellie will be keeping an eye on those questions, and we'll coordinate those with the presenters when it comes to question time. There is the raise hand function there as well. So if you have any issues, then please, raise your hand. We will probably do most of the questions via chat. If time permits, we might open up to some verbal questions as well. But yeah, they're the key things from the housekeeping end. We are recording the session, and if anyone has any issues with anything, then just pop it in the chat and we'll be keeping an eye on that.
Thanks, Joe. That's great. I'd like to thank Joe and Ellie, who are running the event for us, and Anthony Clark, who's got the backup on the video should my internet die or have any major computer failures. Anthony's got copies of the video and will back us up. So if we jump onto that first slide, and I'll just give an overview of the process we went through and some of the key criteria we looked at for selecting these farms. Next slide, thanks, Joe. Excellent, thank you. So we had 10 locations which we as the wider project team nominated. And out of that, we selected 5 locations which went up to a governance group which selected the final 3. What we were looking at in these particular areas was obviously issues with connectivity, which wasn't hard to find once you sort of get out of the metropolitan area. One of the specific criteria was we were looking at commercial enterprises. We did have a few DPI and research and other locations that we liked, but part of the whole pilot program was to engage with commercial suppliers in a commercial situation and get the actual producers' feedback. We obviously needed collaborators who were interested in ag tech and had a need for ag tech as well. we wanted to have as many different sectors represented as possible, because we could only had enough for 3 locations, but wanted to really cover as many different agricultural sectors as possible. So I think we've done that really well with 3 locations. Obviously, we want to look at different geographies, so they all weren't in the one area. So we had different landscapes and different agricultural regions. And then also we really needed participants that were willing to collaborate. They've all given a lot of their time in working with the hardware, getting the hardware set up, but also some of the content that you'll see, and giving their time today. So really needed someone that was keen to collaborate, and obviously are willing to participate and get out there in public and share their experience. So I'd really like to thank our 3 producers which are here today, and for their collaboration during the whole project. So this is a slide I used in the first event. We've got the 3 locations, Canamble, which is Brian Ditchfield, which is primarily livestock enterprise with some opportunity fodder and cropping, dryland irrigation. Then Rob Tuck down at Narromine, which is an aggregation of multiple properties across 2 main areas. I'll give you a bit more detail about that as we go through. As a livestock enterprise, dryland cropping and irrigated cropping, and then the irrigation systems has flood, overhead and drip irrigation, so a good amount of diversity there, and a lot of challenges which we're looking at with the ag tech solutions. And then James Crossing at Angelong, which is a large vineyard area and cattle grazing, obviously dryland production for the grazing area, and irrigated vines for the wine production. So we had a really good mix there. On the right hand side, for those which weren't at last week's event, a list of the different sensor types which we were looking at, and also the backhaul connectivity networks that we tried to get across most of the properties. So very diverse sensor range, diverse connectivity options in multiple different geographies with different ag sectors. Thanks, Joe. So we'll kick into Brian's property, Brolga at Canamble. One of the main challenges which Brian had is he's got 2 main properties, and they're something like 45 kilometres apart, one on either side of town. And part of the challenge was it was very difficult for them to monitor what was happening on the other properties, and also keep track of what was happening on their main property. So we had some really interesting setups there. So I'll just jump on to Brian's video. Once we complete the video, I've got a couple of questions I'd like to put to Brian, and then we'll have some Q&A around that Canamble site. And if you've got any questions, just put them through on that chat function to Brian. Is that coming up okay there, Joe?
Yeah, looks good.
Hi, my name is Brian Ditchfield. I run a mixed farming enterprise with sheep, cattle and a little bit of fodder cropping southeast of Canamble towards the Warrumbungle Mountains with about a 450 mil rainfall. Some of the technologies we've put on through the program include tank level sensors, trough level sensors, bore level sensors, also cattle tracking, cattle weighing in paddock, video surveillance, Wi-Fi across the property, rain gauges, soil moisture monitors. Some of the benefits I've seen from the technology include not having to travel to the other property, which is 50 kilometres away, to check water as often, which is a big cost saving. Being able to see how much rain we've had at various locations on each property. Being able to see in real time, day to day, how much weight cattle are putting on. This side panel is adjustable for the size if you've got smaller cattle using it, so that you don't get 2 going in at once. That has changed on the newer design, I did notice the other day. He's got a panel in either side. But yeah, this is basically it. They just walk on there, step on there with the front 2 feet while they're licking at the whatever lick block you put in there, and you get the weight. Somehow it works out the weight. One of the best things that we've seen so far is the other day I had an instance where a tank was reading low, and I could work out from the data that I was getting that it was most probably a trough, so I could get my tools and take my tools with me out to the other place, which is 50 k's away, and just save me having to go out there, find out what the problem was, then come and get tools and bits and pieces to fix it. So I was able to work it out before I left. During the installation, I was involved a fair bit with putting stuff in. Some of the suppliers, my involvement was just where to put things, and they put a tower in and whatnot. Other ones I had to put a tower in for them. Another lot I converted a windmill to make it as an aerial too, because everything you needs to have antennas to talk to one another. And with the way some of the things are working, I can see that probably a couple more antennas to boost the signal around the place a little bit further would be beneficial. So that's something I could look at in the future, just to make the recording more regular. Things that could be done better, if I knew what I know now, would be a little bit more research into what suppliers are expecting that you can do, and you knowing what they can do, and it's just understanding what they're wanting how they want to go about it, and that everything seems to use different technologies, and so you've got multiple technologies in the one place, and just knowing that you've got to have access, be able to access it, and if you want to modify something. Before we started this pilot, I'd had previously been looking at tank sensors, but the only things I could find were stuff on the one place you couldn't do remotely, and so it has been an eye-opener to find stuff that we can do multiple places at 50 kilometres apart, or you can even go 1,000 kilometres apart to use the technology, or further. I didn't know that there was all this sort of stuff out there. I didn't know you could get in paddock weighing for cattle. Just lots of things that I didn't know that I'm finding out since doing this, and still finding out things that are available. All the data that comes in from all the devices gets sent to a central dashboard that it makes it that you can, because there are different suppliers, so it puts all the suppliers in the one place. You can look on the one screen and see what everything's doing in the house. So although you can use the suppliers' one's telemetry out in the paddocks, but back in the house you can still have a look at what's doing on the dashboard and see how everything's happening. And it's probably in a little bit more user-friendly format. The first thing I check in the morning when I get up is probably the water levels, that there's no problems there. About 7 o'clock in the morning we'll get a report on what the cattle figures have done on the previous day, so we can see what weights they've put on, and have a look at the weather, see what rain we've had or not had. We're getting a lot of data into the dashboard, and in the future hopefully we'll be able to look at records on what not only what rainfall we've had, which is what everyone's kept previously, but we're going to look at temperature, we can look at predominant wind directions for if we want to spraying at certain times, and what the soil moisture is doing. So over a long term we'll be able to look what it sort of builds up, what we can extrapolate from that data. This is a porosity moisture probe. It measures how much moisture is in the soil down to a depth of 1.8 metres. So there's not a lot to look at here, but it's doing its job, and it's a more long-term thing, getting the data from it. So we'll see how it goes as it dries out. One of the easiest things for someone to adopt would be the rain gauges, so you can know what you're getting not only at your house but on various places over your property, and in real time. If you want to spray or whatever, you know what's happened on different or on other properties, and your wind directions and all that sort of thing. But also your tank sensors is another easy one, because then it just gives you peace of mind. You know what your tank's doing. You haven't got to wait till you go and check it to find out you got a problem. You can take the tools with you before you go. Some of the benefits in the technology that give you peace of mind is just knowing what knowing what your water's doing, knowing that your stock are performing the way that you want them to perform, knowing that your stock in the yards looking doing what they're supposed to be, not getting caught or anything, it just makes it a lot less stressful. I'd be happy to recommend to farmers to look at some of this stuff and invest in some of this connectivity to help you manage your places better and see what's going on.
We've just had a question come in for you, Brian. Did you need any training in data interpretation? And was this provided as part of the trial? And also, did you have input into the information presented in the dashboard?
No, there wasn't. No need to learn anything majorly. It's all pretty much straightforward. Most of the suppliers have got that, so you can understand all the data. So you haven't really had to learn anything. Maybe the moisture probe, that's just a heap of squiggly lines, so I haven't quite got my head around that, but at least it's doing something with this rain the other day that I have seen some movement on it. And what was the other part of the question?
Did you have input into the information presented in the dashboard?
Yeah, we had some we were consulted what we'd like to have in it and how we'd like it presented. So we had a fair bit of input into that.
Brian, just a quick one from me while we get a few more coming through on the chat. How much time is the water monitoring out at Newlands saved, do you think? I know there's a couple of instances where you've picked things up over the last sort of 6 months since that's been live.
Time saved. I suppose you've still got to go out and check it, but you've only got to go out a couple of times a week, not every second day. So, to go out and check the water, you're sort of looking at 3 hours, an hour out and then an hour back sort of thing. And then you're looking around and that sort of thing. So yeah, it has given a large saving just in the fact that you haven't got to keep doing it every second or third day sort of thing. You can, do it twice a week. And so you can just try to plan that into other things. And if you have got a problem, you haven't got to go out there, find the problem, then have to come back and get stuff. So you sort of, haven't got to do a double trip.
Yeah. So you're a lot better prepared when you do actually go out there with the right tools and equipment.
Well, you hope you've got the right things anyway.
As best as possible.
Thanks. Look, my computer seems to have caught up with some extra questions in here. Did you want me just to run through those ones, Scott?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Ellie.
Yeah, beautiful. Are you using your smartphone out in the field more? And has that presented any hurdles to overcome?
I have a look. I am looking at it more out in the paddock. If you see something, you sort of, how's that? How's that compare to what it should be, sort of thing. Or we have got tracking tags on cattle, so when you're trying to find heifers that are down calving, sort of thing, especially if you get home late after dark, sort of thing, you can go and find, or even just to count the heifers. You can even and check on them. You can go and find them in the paddock easily at night, sort of. Which makes it a lot better.
Beautiful. And Brian, how long did the teething problems take to sort out with the technology, such as the wrong data being displayed, and how often do these problems pop up now?
Took a little while, but most of them are under control. We've still got a couple of little issues that we've got to still sort out, but mostly they don't take too long to get under control. Once I suppose our biggest problem is we've just got so much stuff at once that you've had to work out, which is what and who you got to talk to. And if you're just doing it yourself, you're not going to put so many things on in the one go. So therefore, you'll find it a lot easier just to be dealing with one person, one thing. So, but it hasn't taken that long, really.
Beautiful, thank you. There is a concept called trusted autonomy. Would you say that you trust the data from the sensors, and what might cause you to second guess?
I I trust it in as far as you've still got to check it. But nothing's infallible. You can still have problems with things. So if something sort of doesn't look right and you can't really work out a reason for it, well, it may be in the data. And so you still got to have, if there's something wrong, you got to go and have a look at it. So, and that's why, with the tank levels and that sort of thing, you still want to go and check them a couple of times a week anyway, just to be on the safe side.
Beautiful. Sorry, you're getting some tough questions coming in here, Brian. Another one, how will you utilise the weight data coming in from your remote weighing system?
Well, just by knowing when to, knowing what your weights are. So you can choose, when you're getting enough in a weight range to sell. But also I can see when we get dry times again, because they will happen again, being able to see when stock are losing condition. And because you can't, when you're feeding them every couple of days and whatnot, you can't tell when they're starting to lose condition until they've lost a heap of condition. But you should be able to pick it up a lot quicker with the weighing system. Well before you can tell by eye.
Beautiful. And last question: what are the cattle tags you are using?
They're OptiWeight tags, and they're satellite, so so he comes up on your phone where they were at the time of day that you're looking at, or when they were last read. And I have been surprised. I didn't think I was going to have as good a coverage when I've moved some cattle in another paddock, but I'm actually getting better coverage out of that than I thought I was going to get. As to where they are on the property, and I haven't got it working properly yet to tell me when they're out of the fences. That's a little issue we're just having at the moment, but they seem to be working reasonably well.
Beautiful, thank you.
OptiWay was the mobile scales.
Oh, sorry, wrong thing.
You had a lot of stock installed in a few weeks.
Movement was what it was.
Yeah, and they're LoRaWAN based tags. Sorry, back to you, Ellie.
No, I was going to say they're the questions. Some good questions coming in. Thank you. So I'll hand back over.
Great, thanks, Ellie.
No worries.
Brian, you did have a lot of technology installed in a matter of a few weeks, and a lot of suppliers coming in and out your front gate. After sort of everything settling down and getting used to the technology you have installed at the moment, what would your next sensor purchase be? What would you like more of, or what do you think you would like different from your experience so far?
I'd probably put a couple, because I haven't got all my tanks censored, so probably a couple more tank sensors I'd like. I'm still, it's like this. Just finding things. We didn't have AgQuip this year to go looking at what other people have got out there either. But so as for what I'd like to get more than what I've got now that I haven't got, I haven't really had that much time to look into it. But I'd like to see what's out there. My daughter came up with an idea the other day when she was around looking at wheat that. She'd like to if they could come up with a drone that could work out what moisture your grain is or something. But whether there's anything coming along in those technologies, who knows? It's just finding these things.
Yeah, and I suppose that was one of the challenges with our pilot, that we were looking at commercially available products only. There is a whole heap of technology out there in different forms, connectivity based and not, which in R&D, which I'm sure you'd love to have a look at. I suppose that the last question before we head into the next section was, you actually got a heap of rain this week, like a lot of areas. What did you find after this event, which you couldn't tell before, as far as having more rain gauges and weather stations around your place, and actually having a soil moisture probe? What's that starting to tell you?
Well, yeah, finally the soil moisture probe's actually done something. It's had enough rain to make the top sort of metre or so. You can see as the moisture's gone down when it's starting to activate it at different levels, because it measures down to 1.8 metres. So in the top metre or so, we've sort of got movement in that sort of, or it's jumped. Just with the rain gauges, how much variance there is across the places, but then again, how you'll get in the shower today, you might get a certain amount, differing amounts, but then tomorrow you'll get more and the gauge has got less. Yeah, and just how it all averages out fairly similarly, but you can see how you're getting more rain through in parts of the place and where storms have gone, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's great. So it's just having that visibility of more defined or higher resolution information across your property rather than one rain gauge at each spot.
Yeah, definitely so.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Brian. I really appreciate the time you've given us on the project, but also the whole day filming. It looks pretty nice and sweet in a 10-minute snippet, but I know it was a pretty big day and it was extremely windy. So I'm impressed that we can actually hear what you're saying, considering what the conditions are like when we're out there. If you look at the video on any replays, you can see the trees in the background just about blowing sideways. So thanks a lot for that. Appreciate your time. If any other questions come through to me via email or in the chat later, I can talk to Brian and get that info back to anyone if they're interested. So thanks a lot, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, for putting up with me.
That's okay. It's been great. Thanks, Joe. If we could shoot back to the keep going. Next slide. Okay, excellent. So next we have James crossing at Angelong. So Angelong is a vineyard and cattle property on the Balabula River near Blaney, actually at Panuara. James had some really particularly challenging issues on his property, and one is the elevation change. I think it's something like 200 meters elevation from the top of the property down to where the river pump is. You'll see in the video it's a pretty steep, hairy drive to go down and check his pump. So one of the things that we were trying to do is get some sort of monitoring down there. I think James's analogy was he could tell when the pump clicked on because it was on off-peak power at 10 p.m. if the lights in the house dimmed, and at 7 a.m. if they sort of dimmed and flickered and came back on at 7, he'd known it had gone off. So that was really the only monitoring he had. So that was one of the challenges. Plus also looking at the diversity of the landscape, getting some environmental measurements across that area. So while we had a similar range of suppliers on all three properties, we did have some slightly different technology installed. So I'll just screen share. I can watch James's video. So is that coming through okay there, Joe?
Yeah, looks good.
My name's James Crossing. We're here at Angelong Vineyard. Angelong is our family property that we run a wine grape vineyard and also a cattle grazing operation. We're in the orange wine region. We're at the lower end of the region at 600 metres. We have been growing grapes for over 20 years and growing cattle for over 50 years. We've been involved in the Farms of the Future pilot project for a bit over 12 months now. We've had technology installed over that 12-month period, and we're starting to collate the data that's coming in from all the technology that's been installed. So in the vineyard we've got some in-crop sensors, so we've got moisture probes, some various instruments for measuring the the growth rates of the vines. We've also got some weather stations which help with the vineyard management, and also just our weather forecasting in general for both enterprises, which will help our management for the cattle operation as well. For our grazing operation, we've got some sensors for measuring our tank levels in our various water tanks that supply our stock water. That also involves some flow meters running to troughs. That way we can monitor the water supply to the mobs of cattle in those respective paddocks. We've also got a Wi-Fi network which gives us Wi-Fi coverage to all our important infrastructure. So that's in particular to our river pumps and to our 2 pump sheds, and then back to the office, and then to a couple of the main houses on the place where we run our offices from. So having that network across the whole property lets us have good connectivity to the internet, and also improves our phone coverage. And then we have a local intranet around the property that we can all log into. We also have a remote cattle weighing instrument that we put out with the cattle in the paddock. That way we haven't got to bring cattle in to weigh them. That just gives us a representative weight of the mob of cattle. The weather stations and the various sensors in the vineyard and some of the water monitoring systems work on a connectivity platform called LoRaWAN, and there's also a couple of the tank monitors are on the 3G, 4G, 5G network, whatever's running, and also there's a couple of them on satellite as well. The benefits we've seen so far in the Smart Ag equipment we've got on farm would be labour saving in the first instance. As you can see, it's a 4k drive to get down to the river, so it's quite an ordeal to get down there. Yeah, it's very steep, so you've got to do it in a full drive. And if we're getting some wet weather, then that's a bit difficult too, so it's not really a all-weather road. Monitoring water levels and stock water has been a pretty good labour saving at this point in time. Because it hasn't been running for very long, we're not getting the full benefit of all the data coming from the vineyard yet. That'll come into the fore during the growing season. Yeah, as far as recommending this to other producers, I'd say yes. We're seeing some definite benefits. Obviously, labour saving would be the first one, and then hopefully we'll be able to make some better management decisions as we collect more data as we go through the growing season. Yeah, most farmers these days rely on their mobile phone and their internet coverage. So having this Wi-Fi network across the property is proving valuable for us. So I would recommend that to other people if you've got any issues with your connectivity. This technology will definitely help. Early days in the project to make a judgment on return on investment, but I think the water monitoring is probably at this stage proving to be the best return on investment, just purely on a labour saving area. I mean, we haven't actually been in the project long enough to make an assessment on everything yet, but I'm pretty excited that there will be a good return on investment. Having the tank level sensors live all the time means just a very quick glance I can check that all the water tanks are still full, and we haven't got any issues with our water infrastructure. I think the biggest labour saving is with our checking water infrastructure. So at a glance in the office we can check the tank levels and the trough levels without actually having to go out in the field and check them. The other one would be over our Wi-Fi network we've got cameras. So through those cameras we can monitor the river level. We've got a camera at the cattle yards, so we can monitor the water troughs that are close to the yards that aren't actually on a level sensor. So it actually means you've got to have a look with the camera, but it's far quicker to do that than to drive out there to check. I would say I've learned a fair bit about technology in this pilot program. It's been a pretty steep learning curve. So we've sort of been involved from selecting the technology right through the installation process and then using it. So yeah, learned quite a lot. Probably something that's quite exciting is the weather stations and just having all that data coming back live. You know, where we've you rely on the bureau forecasts, and then when it rains, you have a bit of a guess how much rain we've had. But now having rain gauges spread right over the place, we can look at our rainfall spread, which has shown that it's not as uniform as we've always thought. I mean, obviously, as this data comes in the future, we'll be able to paint a bit more accurate picture on that. Installation of the technology was basically done by the suppliers. We assisted with the Wi-Fi installation because we needed to put masts up on our sheds, and because we already had some antennas and other equipment on our sheds, we got involved in that installation just so that we could put our existing technology back up on the poles. So there was a bit of time doing that, but we're very happy with the result that we've got now. We can pull our towers down quite easily to do any adjustments as required in the future. Haven't been collecting data for long enough yet to get the full value of all the sensors, but I'm pretty sure moisture monitoring is going to be invaluable to us going forward. I mean, we've had the luxury of a very wet winter while these sensors have been installed, so we're seeing pretty good results there as the moisture level rises. So going forward, we're not always going to have wet winters and a wet spring like we're having now, but it definitely would be putting more moisture monitoring sensors in. On the installation process, knowing what I know now, I think we definitely should have put more protection around the cabling on a few of the sensors. We've had issues with either hares or wallabies chewing the cables, so that was something we didn't really foresee, but we got onto that pretty quickly after the first one got chewed. So yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be planned, particularly in the vineyard with the quantity of wildlife that comes in and their obviously taste for plastic. Before we launched into the pilot, we weren't really using much technology. We've got some moisture monitoring, but that was all manual read. So that involved going out into the blocks and actually physically downloading the data from those from that moisture monitoring equipment. So been a long time since we've had a reliable weather station, so this was exciting to get all this technology installed. As part of the project, we have a single point dashboard. This was installed particularly in our office, because that's where we work from most of the time. That single point dashboard collects all the data from all the sensors, so it can collate information coming in from all the suppliers who use different platforms for all their different technology. So this dashboard can pull all that together and then display it in one single format that we can then customise to our needs. The other thing it can do is make reporting easier, that we can pull data out of reports in any format that we like. And the other thing, we can set it up with we can customise the screens to show combined data from different suppliers on the one page. For example, rain gauges, we can put all the rain gauge data on one particular page. And then it also does playlists, so we can customise what we want to display, and that can be just continually scrolling through. So at a glance, you can just get all the relevant data as required. But I think we probably check the water levels at the moment the most. I mean, we're not in our growing season yet, so we're not checking continually any soil moisture or any data coming from the vines, but I'm quite sure when we're in the middle of the growing season, that's what we'll be looking at very regularly. Another benefit we're seeing with the technology, as far as or as well as labour saving, is also peace of mind. Knowing that all the infrastructure, that our stock have got adequate water. If you can put that to rest in your mind, then we've got plenty of time to be concentrating on other things, other more important things. As far as other producers starting out with this technology, I'd say, just look at your relevant enterprise, and then what technology might fit. Obviously, with livestock, monitoring water is critical for any operation that's running livestock. And then for intensive agriculture like we have, they're very valuable to have accurate weather stations and all the moisture monitoring equipment as well.
Great, thanks, Joe. If we could get James up onto the screen, I'd like to welcome James. The vineyard's looking pretty nice compared to when we were setting everything up 12 months ago. I'm glad we didn't have to do videos then. It was yeah, a lot drier, especially down towards the river there. We've got a couple of questions coming in, but I'd just like to, one of the comments you made towards the end there, James, was that you hadn't seen a lot of movement on the soil moisture. Obviously, been off season in the vineyard. So have you seen anything starting to move in those soil moisture profiles over the last month or so, especially with these few bits of rain that we've had?
Yeah, we definitely are. We're getting some really good results coming through and some interesting data. It was, we had quite a wet winter and early spring, so you'd expect that the moisture level would have been at field capacity or full right through, but it was interesting the last, before this last rainfall event, how much things have started to dry. So it was good to see everything heading back up to saturation again on this rainfall event. Just to point on the probes, though, I think they really need to be in for a full season, and then they can be calibrated, because depends on the soil type, and then you can calibrate the field capacity, refill points, available water, and all those parts of the probe can then be calibrated. So then the data will be more reliable and more useful for planning in the future.
So you've got a few different probe sites across the vineyard. Are you seeing differences across those different soil types already?
Not a huge amount. It was probably the rate of drying out did vary a bit, and I guess the lighter the soil, the quicker it dries, obviously, and the heavier the clay, the more it retains moisture. But I guess we hadn't had a big enough drying effect really to see that going to any sort of extremes.
Yeah, great. Thanks, James. Ellie, is there any questions coming through on the chat?
Yes, there is. Okay. James, given your experiences, is there any gaps in the sensors that need to be filled? I.e., what additional type of data do you think would be valuable in addition to moisture monitoring, i.e. soil health sensors?
Yeah, I think anything that will help us, well, I suppose, improve our production or increase our production, and obviously vine health is critical to that. So soil health would be. I'm not sure of what technology is out there for that, but I'd be very excited to be trying any of that technology. Interestingly, I mentioned in the video that we hadn't actually utilised much of our data in the vineyard yet. We hadn't actually had much data coming from the vines, but that's coming in now as we're in the growing season. So we're getting data back from our in-vine sensors, such as obviously rainfall, and then we've got leaf wetness, leaf temperature, and then humidity. So this is helping us to do disease prediction, so we can formulate a more effective fungicide program. And then as we move forward and have more data and some historical data, we can do things like disease modelling. And this is going to result in a more targeted approach with our spraying, and potentially even use less chemicals.
Beautiful, thank you. And can you turn on and off a water pump remotely using the technology, or just receive data and levels?
No, at this stage we're still only at monitoring, actually at a monitoring level. So we're looking at technology now, and we'll probably do that over our Wi-Fi network to actually monitor individual things on the pumps, like pressure and flow, and voltage, current, and those kind of things on the pump. But no, we're not at the switching on and off stage yet, but that's definitely coming. I'm working on that to try and get that bit of that technology in there, but it's a little bit more involved than just plug and play with that kind of things. These devices need to be customized to the particular pump.
Beautiful, thank you. And you can stay, so we've got you can say steep learning curve. Can you make sense of the best use of all the data yourself, or ideally do you require additional assistance from suppliers or advisors to pull it all together for maximum effect?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the basic data coming in, obviously, rainfall and humidity and all those things are quite easy to interpret yourself. But then when we start looking at, I suppose, moisture levels at various levels in the soil profile, that's going to take a little bit more interpreting. We'll probably use some agronomic advice on that. And then, there's items on the vines measuring trunk circumference and bud temperature and all that sort of things. I think we're not at the stage yet where we can utilise that data effectively until we get some historical data in, and then we can start looking at trends. And I'll definitely after a bit of help to interpret that data when we've got all that sitting there on the screen. Like Brian said, there's a lot of squiggly lines to look at, but you've got to actually get your head around what it all means.
Thank you. James, what dashboard are you using?
The dashboard is put together by a company called Peartree. So that's the one I think we're all using. And that platform's particularly good at bringing all the data from, all the producers in together. I think it's been a bit complicated. There's still one of the moisture monitoring sensors that we haven't been able to integrate on Peartree yet, but they're still working on it. So I think it's just a matter of time to get that data in, and it's about presenting the data in a usable format as well.
Beautiful. And last one for you, James. Is there any consumer-focused data you think you can think of, say for those that buy your wine?
Probably at this stage, as far as growing the crops, we don't really need to be sharing that data with our wine consumers. But I think from our social media point of view, we can probably be utilising a bit of the technology we've got. From probably the cameras to be just showing a bit more of the vineyard and what we do there, and even some social media shots. Just a daily landscape from Angelong, just things like that. So, but as far as because we don't make any wine here, we're only growing the grapes. There's not too much we can actually share with the consumer.
And one more's coming in. Sorry, we're going to keep going. How did you set up the Wi-Fi, and what system do you use? How do you boost it all around the property?
We actually have reasonable phone coverage on the higher elevations of Angelong, but it was actually trying to get mobile service down to the river and to the lower grazing areas. So the Wi-Fi network we've used is put together by Zedify. There was some initial mapping done, and a lot of that was virtual mapping. They've got coverage maps to work out how far their signal will go. So that was a reasonably straightforward process. And then we just had to try and make sure that we covered all our infrastructure, like our 2 pump sheds, cattle yards, our 3 houses, and obviously down to the river pump. What was the other part of the question?
I just have it would be boosted around the property.
So really, once it's installed, all that's done automatically. There's no, everything just works. So there was a little bit of readjustment of antennas when we set it up to make sure that everything was pointing in the right direction, but it was a pretty seamless. It actually works very well. The Wi-Fi coverage is not 100% everywhere because you've still got to be in the zone of the antennas. But if you know where, if you know where you need to be, it's actually quite easy to pick up the Wi-Fi signal.
Beautiful, thank you. And they're all the questions that have come in for you, James. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Ellie. So one of those key things with that Wi-Fi down at the pump is that you can now get internet access. You can do Wi-Fi calling, so you're not sort of down there on your own. That'd be a pretty major security issue, especially if you're down there at night. So does that, give you some sort of peace of mind when you're down there or when someone else is down there that they've got connectivity now?
Yeah, it definitely does, Scott. And it was interesting last year with the dry times. We had quite a lot of issues with water delivery on the river, and I was down there regularly checking the pumps, and most of that was done at night. So you're down there on your own, moving around the dark, and it's a pretty steep track down there. So peace of mind's pretty good there, and the safety of our staff's always very important. So it's really good, and the coverage Wi-Fi coverage is pretty much all the way on the road down there as well. So you've got phone coverage and data coverage all the way.
Great. So you're with that Wi-Fi, it's enabled you to have cameras. What's the, I suppose, most surprising use of cameras that you've found? There's obviously some obvious ones, but sort of what things have you picked up which you didn't think you'd be able to do?
Probably the camera at the cattle yards with it's a big pan zoom tilt camera. It means we can have a 360-degree view with that camera, and it'll zoom right in. So we can have a look at really everywhere on the top area of the farm. Covers a lot of the vineyards. So even areas like when we're harvesting, if we're trying to find a truck that might have got himself lost, we can just zoom it around and have a look. It's amazing what you can see. And then, livestock, when we're weaning in the yards, that'll be great because I can just keep an eye on the cattle feeders and stock water and just make sure everything's behaving themselves. Yeah,
I know that day we were filming, you had a heifer calving in the yards, and we were actually checking that out. So I went up there to have a look because you could see it from the office.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Excellent. Appreciate your time, James. Thanks for that. There's no questions coming in from the crowd, so we might thank you on that one and head off to Narromine, where we've got some different challenges again.
Right. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, James. Cheers. So just pull up the next slide. Thanks, Joe, and I can get this video spilled up. Excellent, thanks. Oh, can we just go back one to that map? Excellent, thanks, Joe. So I'd like to introduce Rob Tuck, who will be watching a video of him next. Similar to the Coonamble situation, Rob's got two groups of enterprises about 25 kilometres apart, and at the point in time when we were looking at this challenge, wanted to get some sort of mobile reception and service in between that, because he travelled that distance a lot, and a lot of the people working on the property were going back and forward, and there was a lot of dead zones, and obviously wanted to be able to monitor conditions at each of those sites. There was irrigation at both those sites, pumps, bores, lateral moves. So there's a lot of irrigation technology out there. It is a mixed enterprise. It does have dryland cropping, irrigation, and a little bit of livestock as well. So I'll just put Rob's video on, and then we'll have some Q&A for Rob after the video finishes.
So we are Rob and Susana Tuck Ag is our company. We farm 10 farms in the Macquarie Valley in a 40k radius. We grow a mixed cropping, broadacre irrigation setup with livestock enterprise as well. So we're very mixed, very diversified, which you've got to be these days. We sit about 240 metres above sea level, so we're in the start of the Western Plains. Really, from here, it's you go bush into very flat country. We're in a very fertile plain between the Macquarie and the Bogan River. Beautiful fertile soils that were laid down here millions of years ago. We're very lucky. We have an underground aquifer here, which was probably linked to the old Macquarie River millions of years ago. So we have a very reliable groundwater source that we can draw water from. Also, we draw water from Burrendong Dam. We have licenses out of Burrendong Dam. So we're a very mixed enterprise. We put about 5,000 hectares of broadacre farming. That being canola, wheat, cereal, pulse rotation. We're very stringent on our rotation. We're a no-till tram tracking situation where it's all about controlled traffic. We use a lot of technology in our farming enterprise. We rely on GPS. For our tram tracking, we use yield mapping, which we benchmark back to try and be more have better productivity, and we use a lot of technology and connectivity to censor things that are going on in our farming situation. We We grow 1,200 to 2,000 hectares of irrigated production on groundwater and surface water. Water's a vital lifeline for us. So when we hit those drought years, it makes it a bit tougher. We technology-wise, we love using technology, and to us, it's really made our enterprise boom, I suppose. So the Farms of the Future program has been pretty important for us. We were dabbling in that space before the program came along. As I mentioned, we're in a 40k radius, 10 farms, so we spent a lot of time checking things, checking pumps, tanks, monitors on weather stations, rain gauges, whatever else. So for us, technology, connectivity is highly important. Our mobile service is not fantastic out here. It has a lot of dead spots, hot spots. So the Wi-Fi connectivity has been fantastic for our program. So the main benefits we've seen in our operation is travel and time, manpower. Labour's really a struggle out here in the bush. We really struggle to find qualified people to come out here and work in this outdoor environment. So our good staff that we have got, if we connect them to sensors, cameras on our farms, they can be doing other operations at the same time while monitoring pumps, tank levels, weather stations, rain gauges, whatever. So it's been great for us. Now we've got to get smarter at what we do, and at the moment, a lot of enterprises out there aren't using technology, so they're doing it the old school way. And if we can use technology and save time, manpower, that equates to money pretty easy. For us, a camera tells 1,000 words. So even just simple, connected either Wi-Fi or 4G cameras that are looking at a site that's important to them, that they know they've got to monitor, that's pretty simple. That gives you a good overview of what's going on. And you can poll at any time you like, midnight if you have to, if it's important. So just a basic camera is a good place to start, and then you can lead into connecting into motors, pumps, weather stations, things like that can give you a lot of data and give you a good real-time snapshot of what's going on in a particular area. As we've ventured further into it, we didn't realise there were so many providers out there supplying different products that can help with this connectivity problem. We've definitely got better at what we do. We've definitely found a few different bandwidths, whether it be Wi-Fi, 4G, or LoRaWAN bandwidths that we can access our hardware into to get that data back to our mobile device. So it's definitely progressed, and I think we'll just keep learning. That's how it is. We spend a bit of time setting up sensors and putting things together. There's a few providers out there that don't offer that. It's I suppose it reflects in the price of the product. You pay more, they'll come and set it up. You pay less if you want to set it up yourself. So it all comes down to dollars you want to spend. There is a bit of time, but it's all pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory, and they're only a phone call away. We'd already had a lot of telemetry on irrigators and remote pump stations that were just giving us basic data, not camera footage, but just basic data that came via SMS if they shut down or if something went wrong. And so we were using a bit of technology. We were just getting into that camera space where we were monitoring pump stations and taking overviews of drains and channel heights and water usage to give us back good data. And also we were, as government legislates more into monitoring meters and metering our water, so we were in that space too, trying to get good, accurate data back from water meters that could be telemetry based and sent back to log. Now we've got connectivity, Wi-Fi connectivity on most of our farms. It opens a huge door for a lot of cameras and more sensors, and definitely cameras for security as well, but also for monitoring pumps and things. Like I said, a camera tells 1,000 words. So pretty simple, pretty easy to look at a picture of a situation and make an assumption whether we need to go there physically and check it or everything's working well. Right, so we're here at a bore site that's monitored. the connectivity program. You can see there's a fuel bowser there that's logged on this app, and we can see the water level in the channel, what this channel height's running at. We can see the water in the drain behind us, and we can see all the functions of the motor here. So we've got engine load, RPMs, PSIs, oil pressure, volts, and engine hours. So that allows us to remotely monitor this whole setup here from home. So we're monitoring our soil profile with devices like this through the connectivity program. So this well, that's a rain gauge on top, but the system's attached to a probe out in the paddock that is down 2 meters, and it's measuring the profile every 20 centimeters. And how that helps us in our what we do, our day-to-day farming, is we know what that profile is before we plant a crop. So before we make a decision where we go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to plant a crop, we can see if the profile is dry or it's got a bucket in there to grow a crop. So those decisions are very important. So as you can see by the canola crop behind us, growing a pretty impressive crop from data that we've got off this monitoring device. This particular pump station here is based on one of our cotton farms. It's a pretty integral part of the farm. It monitors and pumps all the water that runs off our tail water return system. So we want to capture all our irrigation water we don't use, it runs off. We don't want to waste any into the environment, or it could have fertiliser, could have anything. So we want to capture all that water. It's very important. So this pump station here, brand new, hasn't got a shed on it just yet, but it's in the pipeline. It's monitored through the connectivity program, and we're sensing these pumps to make sure that they're still running when we start them, they don't shut down, and to see what this water level is doing behind us. So we know if this water level fills up too full, we need to rev the pumps up or down so we can keep that water away and keep it within a closed system into that reservoir there, so it can be ready for reuse. The old school way of doing it, before we went to bed at night time, whoever lived on this farm would have to hop in a vehicle, 10, 11 o'clock at night, and do a round around all these pumps, take him an hour probably. On his own, no one on farm, so it had work health and safety issues for starters. If something happened, or he got bogged, or a ute slipped off a ledge or something, there's no one to contact. Most of the guys are asleep, so he had to drive around and monitor all these before he went to bed. And then first thing, when he got up in the morning at daylight, he'd monitor them again. So there was still a phase there of 7 or 8 hours in between, or 6 hours, 7 hours, where they were just running unattended. So now it's connected to his mobile device, and he can actually check them before he goes to bed on his bedside table, make sure all the functions are right, and then if he wakes up in the middle of the night for some reason having a bad thought that something's going wrong, he can just roll over and check it again. Happy days. Work health and safety is a really important one. These guys, they don't have to drive around in the middle of the night. They might be tired, they've worked all day, and then they've got to drive around in the middle of the night and check things. So, it has work health and safety issues. So it definitely ticks that box. It also ticks the box of time. Your time's precious. You've knocked off once already. You want to spend it with your family, not driving around checking pump stations. And it's time saving for us, monetary wise, dollar wise, and also wear and tear on vehicles. And the other most important thing is when it rains, when it's pouring rain and it's too wet to access these sites, we can remotely look at them. We're not trying to plough down here on a 4-wheel motorbike or a buggy or on foot sometimes. You can't drive a vehicle down here, so that's where they really kick goals. I think the good old rule of thumb is the first money is the best money. So I think if you're going to do it, you're better off spending a bit more money up front, getting the quality, and I think that has long-term payback. So the dashboard that we have in our office scrolls through all the sensors we've got. It has the ability to do that. So, when I'm in the office, which is rarely, in agriculture these days, there's not a lot of room for sitting in an office. We've got to be out and about and really have a dashboard in our top pocket, which we do. Everyone's got a smart device. But when we are in the office, it allows us the ability to have that scrolling over in front of us, especially for weather decisions, spray decisions. An operator can call and say, I'm not quite sure what the conditions are doing on this farm. Should I proceed? Should I mix up a load of chemical to go to spray, or should I not? So you can have an informed decision. So as part of our planning routines, weather is very important. We want to know what the weather's doing at a particular spot before we perform a particular operation. So weather's pretty important. It drives agriculture. Also rainfall. We want to know if there's rainfall on a particular farm, so we don't send a operation there and it's going to be wet, they're going to be washed out. So rainfall is pretty important for us too. Yeah, there's always better things we can do with data. I think down the track, definitely benchmarking that data. We should be logging that data and going back and looking at historical records and seeing if we can come up with some trends on that data that might help us make important management decisions. With having data at our fingertips and to access it on a smart device in our pocket, definitely lowers our stress levels. It allows us to have confidence in what we're doing and things that are working remotely. It allows us to sleep definitely longer at night. In our operation, the Farm Smart program, has had a lot of benefits for us, but the main benefit has been travel, as in we commute between 10 farms, monitoring all different sorts of applications. So the time saving has been huge for us. Time saving, fuel saving, vehicle saving, safety saving, just not putting guys on roads in the middle of the night to check remote pump stations. We've been able to monitor that via a desktop or via a mobile device. So that's been hugely beneficial for our enterprise. So Farm to the Future program, connectivity program's been probably a highlight over the last 12 months. It's had a lot of resources, a lot of effort and a lot of time put into to the program, and we've come away a lot smarter. We've come away a lot better in what we do, and we're making more informed decisions.
Thanks. I'd just like to welcome Rob, if we can bring him up front and centre. Thanks, Joe. Rob, there's a couple of things that I picked up on that, obviously being close to the project, but there's a lot of talk about pump monitoring, but also the visual importance of cameras at those sites. What's the balance between that? Obviously, you're getting that information directly through the monitoring, but what's the benefit of having a camera there as well, if you can see that information?
No, good point, Scotty. All that data on your smart device is fantastic, but and then someone asked, I think one of in Brian's presentation, it was a good question. Do you trust the data? Do you think the data is right? Well, that's where a camera tells 1,000 words. Just that one vision, just that one bit of footage, looking at that broad perspective. It might be a channel, might be a res, it might be a whatever, a tank, could be whatever. Just gives you that backup and that assurance that data you're seeing is correct. So with most of our systems now, we like to have just a standalone camera that usually works on a different system, as in it's not connected to the same hardware, I suppose, that's transmitting that response back to your smart device. So there's actually one, because usually, as everyone knows with technology, it's all good while it's working, but it usually wants to have a bit of a connectivity spit the dummy when the most vital time when you want to look at it. So it's good to just have those two sources there too. It's a vision.
Yeah. So we only I did one of your sort of setups and sites as far as pump monitoring goes. Is this something outside the program you're looking at continuing and expanding? There's obviously a few more sites across your properties which you're operating.
Yeah, as you know, we were already in this space. We'd already done a couple of pump stations already with particular suppliers that we found and went to them and said, this is what we want to do. Can you do it for me? And one of those providers is part of the program. And we'd actually gone to them 12 months or so before and said, this is what we want to do. And we'd actually had a bit of a pilot program with them, helping build a platform to get exactly what we wanted to look at. We're in this space. We've been in this space for a while. I mean, we started really early in the piece, probably 5, 6, maybe 10 years ago with telemetry. We were utilising telemetry on all our irrigators and our laterals and our pump drip stations, and so which was provided by the providers of the hardware, the machine that we were using. So that was going through their platform, but this is just really we've actually refined it now, and this program's really been important in that, and refining that data you're getting back and making it more useful.
Excellent, thanks. I think, Elliot, there's a couple of questions in the chat there at the moment. If you'd like to read those out to Rob, that'd be great.
Yeah, happy to. Rob, you have an enormous amount of data being captured. It seems like it would be a full-time job to stay on top of it, especially as you add more sensors. Would critical incident flags be useful, i.e. only get alerts from a sensor when data from it gets into a critical zone that requires investigation?
So good question. We have that now, and it wasn't talked about in the presentation, but most of those providers have an alert system that comes through, and we set up some critical points, definitely some minimum and some maximums, and we comes through with an SMS message. So, I think when I said in the presentation, the guy who's looking after that farm, he wakes up at midnight thinking about, shit, what's going on? He can look at his phone. Well, actually, if something did go wrong, that phone would send him a text. So, that phone would ring or beep or ding or whatever beside him. And if he woke up, he would be able to look, and it would give him a report and say, this particular sensor at a particular site has hit a limit. This is the limit, and then would enable him then to go onto that particular site or that provider and look into it a bit harder. So, we are getting reports back.
Thank you. Rob, do you use any asset tracking on vehicles or staff?
We didn't. As part of the program, we have trialled a couple of satellite trackers that we've moved around in different vehicles just to see if we could extrapolate some data that was going to be useful for us. That didn't work really well. I mean, even with a satellite device, it's still, as soon as you go under trees or, you don't have direct vision to a satellite, they drop out. So we're not getting good data from it. Down the track, it's definitely something for work health and safety purposes that we need to do. We do it in all our tractors and all our machines, our headers, our harvesters, and everything else is tracked to it right down to a point where it's an ant trail exactly where they went and what they're doing, which is good. That ticks the work health and safety box. But at the moment, no. Beside those couple of satellite trackers we're trialling, which aren't ticking the box particularly, and we need to get. That's a space we need to be looking at a bit further down the track, I think.
Thank you. Rob, do you think control as against just monitoring would offer added benefits? If so, what benefits?
We do. We can control things now. So that whole drip station, we saw some footage of, which is 1.7 million metres of buried drip tape growing a production crop, is monitored from a smart device, an iPad or a phone. It can be started, it can be stopped, it can be ramped up, it can be ramped down, whatever. So the advantage that has, the guy who's in charge of that particular drip station, one of our managers, he can be somewhere else, monitoring another program or monitoring men or staff or wherever. He could be in an office and he can still be controlling that drip station from remotely. So we do it now. There's some devices we don't want to remotely control, as in pump stations. We find it better for someone to go there and actually physically have a look, because there's things you can't check an oil level, you can't, there's just things, noises, especially like in remote pump stations. I mean, I suppose we can have a microphone there, we can listen to it, but if you pull up there to site and you get out and you listen, you can pick up, mate, there might be a bearing starting to fail, or there might be a PDO shaft or something. There's just little things that you get a sixth sense about. So we'd like to have somewhere along the line, at least once a day, someone go to the pump station and have a listen and a look. Greasing things, well, I suppose we could remotely grease, but you've got to, there's a point where economics come into it. You've got to, we want a person to go there once a day, really, and check it.
Beautiful. Do you monitor all your key equipment using telemetry, planting, spraying, and harvesting?
We do. We do pretty well. And that's probably through the manufacturer of the machines. We won't mention too many brand names, but we are all green. And they have a pretty good platform that can monitor everything and anything, right down to the point, the fuel being used, what RPMs it's running at, exactly what that machine's doing. So yeah, we do, and we find that very useful, especially with our 10 farms. Like I said, our operations managers can be at different farms, and then they can still look on their smart device to see what's going on with that machine that they just left, that they set up 30 k's away, and they can still see if it's going up and down, what the tractor's doing, rev range is right, it's not overloaded, it's not and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we do that now.
That's great, thank you. And last one, just to clarify, do you have any sensors from a number excuse me, a number of providers all sending data to the one platform?
We do, and like James talked about, under the program, there's a platform called Pear Tree, which we use, and it picks up all the different sensors from different providers and puts it onto the one platform. We find it pretty good. It's got a lot of data, a lot of information. And if you really want to delve into it, well, then you can actually go to the particular provider's platform. But it just gives you that overview, that quick snapshot overview that you can check all levels, or you can check all weather or all rainfall. Like, you can put it in specific points. So I can check all the rainfall on 10 different farms. I can check all the levels on 20 different pumps on 10 different farms, all on the one page. So it just gives you that quick snapshot overview. And the good thing about that is, we can give that platform to other key personnel in our staff, and they can also check that data. If I'm not here, it's not all reliant on me. So we can share that workload.
Thanks, Rob. And just another one's coming in. Can you please explain more about how you use yield mapping?
Well, there's a lot of information out there, I suppose, and a lot of people have got different views on how we're using yield mapping. We've been collecting data for 20 years now, I suppose. So we've got a lot of data on different fields. In our system at the moment, we probably don't use that yield data to its full potential, as in we do a bit of variable rating with it, but this is in a broadacre system, I must admit. And the reason we don't is because on all the data we've collected over 20 years, we find our limiting resource is water. It's not fertilizer, it's not seeding rate, it's water, it's moisture. So if you can get your moisture right, like more water in the profile, through different farming technologies that trap more moisture in the profile, that's important to us. The fertilizer is really, in a very good production year like this year, yes, but in 80% of the time, it's all about the water. So that's our broadacre system. In our irrigation system, our yield data is pretty important. We definitely go back and benchmark that at the end of the season and look at things that there might be a problem in a field, or there might be and then we extrapolate that. We might sit down with our guys and we say, right, what happened in that field? Why is this area here, yielding 25% below the field average? And usually you can extrapolate out that someone missed an irrigation change, or forgot to turn the spreader on there, or so. It's handy. It's very good. Satellite data, NDVI images have been a big part of our operation in the last 5 or 6 years, where we do variable rate applications of especially growth regulants. So we can get an image of the vigor index of a crop, how it's growing, and then we can plug that into an aeroplane, and we can put on different rates of growth regulant or growth prohibitors, I suppose, to stop the crop getting vegetative in one stage, and where it's not very vegetative, we mightn't put any on. So it's been fantastic for that. Also, NDVI images have been just good to have a good overview of your crop, I suppose, and you can make some management decisions around that. So we use all the data, but you've got to take it all with a bit of grain of salt, I suppose. And like James said, it's getting a collection of data at the end of the day, and looking back on the historical data, and then you can make some good informed decisions. If you've only got 6 months or 1 year of data, it can give you a skewed view. You've got to have a few years of data.
That's great. Thanks, Rob. I've got one last question, as we're starting to run out of time. It's been a good session with everyone giving their feedback. Obviously, with water being your limiting factor, I can't remember how many different rain measurement points we've got, but there's probably at least 10 across all those properties. What have you found the variation to be over this last week or so across those different properties, and is it what you expected or did it surprise you?
There is a lot of variation. I still like the good old manual rain gauge. It doesn't tell lies. There is variation, a lot of variation in rainfall. And even, we might have 3 rain gauges on the one property, within a kilometre of each other, variation. So definitely a lot of variation in rainfall. I suppose it's what you've got to do. It's giving you that broad overview, really, and that's what you want. And we're not actually using that data that we get from those remote rain gauges to record, as in, well, we have got a recorder, I suppose, but it's not our main recording rainfall. We'll still use the rain gauge rainfall that we have at the back of the office on each place or at their house, or that's our final measurement. But definitely a lot of variation in rainfall, and I think that's nature. That's how it is.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate your time. It's great. Place is definitely looking good in that video. So glad we did that last month rather than 3 or 4 months ago. But appreciate your time, mate. Thanks for that.
Can we order a season like that under the program every year, please? That'd be good.
Sure. Love to be able to do that. Awesome. If we could just jump back to those slides. Thanks, Joe. We've got about 5 minutes to go. If anyone has any other questions that they think of afterwards, please shoot them through to me by email. And if I can't get back to you, I can talk to Brian or James or Rob. I'd like to thank all 3 of our collaborators. They've done a really good job. Really done a really good job with their media presentation, and they've put up with a lot of people traipsing across their properties over the last 12 months and taking up their time. But it's been really beneficial for us as part of our valuation, and from their feedback, been valuable experience for them as well. So glad they could share that. Those videos which we presented today will all be made available on our website once we get everything up and done and the series completed. So you'll be able to go back and view those later if there's anything else that you want to pick up on that. So before we close out, I'd just like to touch on our e-resources again. We had hoped to get those live last week, but we're pretty close now. There were some updates pushed last week. So a lot of what you saw in those videos today, we have on 2 websites. One's a 360-degree virtual tour where there are a few hotspots. There's 4 hotspots on each of those pilot farms, which show you information about the sensors. And there's also some extra video content, which didn't make those final cuts, which we thought we wanted to share. So that'll be available on the virtual tour. And then we have also the FarmXR web application, where you'll be able to click on all of those sensors and see an image of that sensor, get some information about it, and in some of those sensors there's some live data coming through from pear tree, so you can have a look at that and get an idea of the difference of the sort of data coming through on those systems. So I'll send out a web link to everyone that's RSVP'd. So if you've got an email from me before, you will get those web links once we're ready to go live. Hopefully we'll do some final checking today and hopefully get that out to you as soon as we can. Jump to the next slide. Thanks, Joe. So that's the conclusion of our second webinar. Next week is our 3rd and final webinar where we'll have our supplier forum. So we'll actually have all of the suppliers involved in the project on 3 different panel sessions, giving an overview of the company, some of the challenges and benefits they've got out of being involved in the program, and also looking at their roadmap forward. Then after each one of those panels, we'll have a quick Q&A, so you'll be able to ask them any questions. We're going to have some more insights from Darren Price from Price Rural, who was involved in a lot of ag tech and was managing the MLA Karwoola site as well. So looking forward to that. Next slide. Thanks, Joe. So yeah, so same Zoom time, same Zoom channel. I hope to see you all next week, and thanks for participating and for all those great questions. Thanks again to Brian, James, and Rob for their contribution to the project. So thanks everyone. Have a great day. Cheers.